Right, so for today's planting, we're once again doing two parts to catch up for when I was away. So for part one, we're going to be starting with the companion plant, which is going to be starting with the Dracaena reflexa, which is going into the north side to protect from any of the unfiltered sunlight that gets through here. This is the area underneath a sycamore fig and a very large cassia, and it is quite well shaded, but there is always that risk as the sun goes far north, it will dip low enough to come underneath the canopy and toast some of the sun-sensitive things in here. So that is going in there. Now, the most sun-sensitive thing here is not the tree itself, it's actually this other companion plant, which I haven't really tried yet as a companion. It is a good one if you're wet enough, and this is actually a cutting from something that has shown incredible resilience over the last 30 years to periodically being completely ignored. This is actually just a garden mint, which is hopefully going to spread out from a nice little barrier. They are a very good barrier plant, but again, you do need the water because they will dry right up. This one has dried up right up several times while its parent has, and come back from that, but they when people say mint will take over their garden in Zambia, if they say that, they water a lot, because it really doesn't here if you don't. So then we're going to be putting in our actual tree today, which is Annona squamosa, which is the rough-skinned custard apple, the very standard custard apple, which is a really good tree, and I really do not think you can get too many of them, because they are really good as a barrier. I mean, if they were the only tree you planted, they would be too many. Anything you plant exclusively is too many, but this is a good one for breaking up sort of mixed plantings and making them just a little bit healthier. And finally, we're going to be putting a nice little piece of Alocaria. This is a pre-rooted piece I separated from its parent, from the root, so it's not too injured down there, because this is quite a wet planting, as I'm doing it in a hurry because it's fairly late. So that shouldn't suffer too much from the wet, whereas a fresh cut one would. The main course of tonight's planting is part two, which is actually a replant in some ways, because this is going into a spot where I had planted a nice little cordyline, which did get destroyed by mole rats. It was actually the last one they destroyed when they worked out they could eat them, but I planted it between two rocks because I was concerned they might, because they had nibbled some small ones before, but then they just wiped it out completely. It was quite a nice big tree, and it sort of was the sort of gateway to my sort of thicket area, which is one of the dense, heavily vegetated areas. Now, its replacement is a tree I had not expected to be planting. This is one I've only found today, but it is one that, generally speaking, the mole rats, if they would eat these, would know by now, because we have a lot of this genus. We do not have this species, and this is actually a true species, which is unusual in this genus, which is citrus. Most of the citrus you see planted are hybrids, and most of those hybrids are between the micranth, which is Citrus hystrix, I think. You have the pomelo, which is Citrus maxima. You have the mandarin, which is Citrus reticulata, and finally the citron, which is Citrus medica, I think, which is what this is. This is actually a cultivar rather than the wild type. I would have preferred the sort of more typical citron, I think, but I was just really pleased to find one at all, because I hadn't really seen them in Zambia. I've seen one in someone's garden, and I did take a cutting, but it didn't thrive. So it was really nice to have this, and this is actually going across from one of my other citrus trees, which is one of the relatively few citrus species that tends to be turned up in cultivation quite regularly, which is Citrus japonica, which is a bit of a misnomer because it might actually not be. We'll find out when it fruits, but it's kumquat. Kumquats can actually be several different species, as can limes, but most of the limes you see in cultivation are hybrids of the previously mentioned several. Now, because this is going into quite a well sort of planted area already, the mole rats did destroy some things, but they didn't destroy everything. There's quite a lot around it already, including a nice little piece of one of the Crassulaceae, which is going to provide a bit of a toxic barrier. We are going to be adding a couple of companion plants in the form of the Sansevieria parva, which is the African hyacinth, and the Aloe arborescens, which is the Krantz aloe or candelabra aloe. So that should be everything for today. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you have enjoyed it, and if you haven't enjoyed it, thank you for watching anyway. Please tune in again tomorrow. I will be planting something else. Not sure what yet, so we will see.